CNBC Africa's Captains of Industry, and today we are in Nairobi, Kenya. We speak to Safaricom Chief Executive Bob Collymore. Again, thank you for making time. There's so much to talk about, very little time, but just give us your reading of the telecommunications landscape. Everyone says it's thriving, it's doing well, there's a lot of good things to talk about, but from somebody leading an organization that is obviously making headwinds in this space, give us a sense of your reading of the telecommunications landscape.
It's changing fast.
Right.
Once upon a time we had 2G, then 3G. Now you've got over-the-top players. You've got people like WhatsApp who are coming into the space and who are taking a huge chunk of the pie. Customer behavior is changing rapidly.
Right.
Data analytics becomes much more important. So it's a really exciting space to be in right now.
Is that dynamism a threat to your business? Because if it moves then too fast for you, then we know what happened to BlackBerry. So is dynamism a threat?
No, we take a Darwinian approach, and it is going to be about survival of the most adaptive. And our challenge always is, how can we adapt? How can we continue to reinvent ourselves? And that's what makes the job exciting for us.
Mobile telephony and especially smartphones have had the biggest impact if we're talking of any piece of innovation in the present generation. Give us a sense of where do you see this going next, and obviously in respect to challenges like penetration and the cost of internet.
Yeah, so you've asked a whole lot of questions there. I mean, the first one is to say that a lot of people don't even realize where it has gotten to today. A lot of people don't realize the impact that the mobile phone has on the farming community, or on the refugee community, or in healthcare. So we are very active in that space because we like to look at the world through the lens of understanding a problem and then solving that problem. So when we look at the plight of refugees in Dadaab and Kakuma, the two refugee camps here, we say, how can we assist with the distribution of food aid more efficiently and with more dignity? When we look at the challenges of maternal health care, particularly in rural districts, given the fact that a lot of people don't actually have a smartphone, they have a simple phone. How can we deliver solutions through that? There is a danger that people only ever see the world through the lens of smartphones. But actually we only have about 6 million smartphones out of 26 million customers. So smartphones indeed has a significant role in giving people access to the internet, but it's not the only way of doing that.
Fintech, you've talked about access via feature phones and all these other phones, and there's a lot of innovation that is targeted at the rural poor, and we really don't get to see the numbers or really appreciate what exactly does. What would you say would be the biggest innovation as far as fintech goes in Kenya now?
Well, there's a report which came out from a researcher at MIT in the last few weeks, which shows the impact that M-Pesa has had on poverty alleviation, particularly amongst the rural poor women, because it has given them access to rudimentary financial services, and that continues to grow. So when we look at our financial services business, our M-Pesa business, we refer to the bread and butter business, which is moving money from one place to the next. And that's pretty solid. But what's growing at quite a pace now is the non-bread and butter business, the payment business, the savings business, the lending business. All of that is growing at quite a comfortable pace for us, and really are heading down that route of deepening financial inclusion.
While we're at that, what would be the magic of M-Pesa, because it has such significance in terms of our lives? We M-Pesa, we don't send money. We M-Pesa, it's part of our lives. But we've seen other markets where it hasn't quite taken off. What is the secret, especially for East Africa?
The secret actually is the Kenyan people, because, and there are lots of reasons why it succeeded, but I still think that one of the main reasons is the Kenyan people have a desire to move money from one place to the next. When someone dies, you need to pay for the funeral, we gather money from dispersed places. That doesn't happen in many other countries. And so the need, I keep coming back to this thing about understanding the need and addressing that need. And because Kenyans have this generosity of spirit, if you like, where if you want to pay school fees, kids are going back to school now, you want to pay school fees, you want to pay hospital bills, you want to pay for a burial or indeed a wedding, you gather money from friends and relatives who are kind of scattered around the country.
Right.
And I think that's the thing which differentiates us from many other markets where that need didn't exist. We simply took the products and say, well, here's M-Pesa. Let's see how it can work in India.
Right.
And it hasn't worked quite so well.
Interesting. Bob, you have managed to outpace and outlast most of the competition, and I bet the headache now is not staying in front, but really coming up with the next sort of innovation. How much of a pressure is that?
I think you framed it well. We don't think about staying in front. We think about meeting the needs.
Right.
And, as the former PS for ICT said, Tunya Demo, said that in Kenya we're blessed with having very many problems to solve. And if you're providing there's a problem to be solved, we are a technology company, we're one of the bigger ones. We say, well, how can we use this technology to solve that problem? Recently I was out in the rural districts visiting milk farmers. And the difference in yield, the difference in knowledge, the difference in prices,
right.
We say, surely we can do something about that. And so for us, the challenges are always there. The question is how can we address those efficiently for our customers? And the competition, competition will do what they have to do.
There's obviously the conversation about big data, and everyone says that is a tipping point as far as Kenya goes. And we need to see more industry players, more corporate leaders take a leading role in this, which we don't see. A lot of leaders don't quite get it. Give us a sense of why is it difficult to have this conversation right now?
I think one of the reasons is that we're not developing data scientists in our universities.
Right.
I would say across the continent, if I'm a broad brush approach. So if I want a data scientist, I actually have to go to Silicon Valley to get it. So now we're looking at how we address that issue. First thing is we have to bring those people in.
Right.
But the second thing is that we have to start investing in developing that talent and working with universities like Strathmore University, for example, in building a curricula so we can start to develop our own Kenyan data scientists. I think that's the main reason. Because when you look at what can be achieved,
right.
I should be able to forecast. I mean, we're going past big data analysis to looking at predictive technologies now.
Right.
So I should be able to predict.
What about the users of these tools? Because we might have the technology, but evidence-based decision-making is certainly not part of our culture. So how do we get corporates and businesses and government even to incorporate this in their decision-making process?
I think it'll come. I think it'll come because I think we look at the behavior of companies like Google. The other day, for example, my daughter was flying over, and when I woke up that morning, Google sent me a message to say flight KQ101 is delayed by 2 hours. And I thought, how do you know?
Right.
Because Google is constantly mining the information which is there. And if Google are going to do that, then companies like us absolutely have to do that. I should be able to predict
right.
when it's time for you to change your phone.
Right.
A few weeks before you do that yourself.
Okay. Have you predicted? Is it time?
Actually, I saw you.
I could do it on iPhone 7.
It is about time you change.
Let's talk about one last point that I wanted to look at would be the cost of internet. While we celebrate all this that is happening, there are conversations that maybe it's time internet became a basic human right, and we need to access it. We're looking at robotics and all these things that are happening around us. But with all these advancements in East Africa, we might compare to other regions that is fairly expensive, but we still have a lot of people who feel like internet is still expensive. Are we going to have affordable internet for all?
Well, it's important to look at the price of internet here compared to other parts of the world, other parts of the continent. And if you do that analysis, you'll see that it's not. Having said that, you do also need to look at income levels.
Right.
And I'm kind of with you on this thing about it being a kind of fundamental human right. And lots of people are doing lots of things to try to find more accessible ways of getting the internet. It doesn't have to be on your mobile phone. So we're investing in putting fiber into the home and into low-cost homes. So we're finding cheaper ways of doing that. Right. Then you've got other people who are putting drones in the sky. Mm-hmm. So I think that there comes a point where that digital divide will get bridged. Right. But there are lots of different solutions for getting there. It's not just going to be about cut the cost of mobile data.
Is PPP the way to go? Because obviously there's government involvement in this. how high in the priority list it is for them is a different thing. But we don't hear a lot of conversations about PPP. Is it that it's not a profitable venture for private sector would want to go in there?
PPPs can be difficult to manage because public and private sectors are driving different agendas and at a different pace. So that's one of the solutions. We got a PPP in the team's undersea cable, which, again, come back to Batanga and Demo, had the foresight to do that. We're not seeing many more PPPs because I think the private sector are perfectly capable of doing that themselves. Look, we often invest in things which don't have any commercial returns because we think it's the right thing to do. We've said that we will connect our schools to our primary schools to free Wi-Fi, not because we'll get a commercial return from it, but because we think if we can get those children more internet ready, more digital ready, then of course our future markets will be there, and of course you're also raising the overall digital literacy in the country.
As a business, what's the next step for Safaricom? Obviously, we've been treated to very impressive numbers every year. When you look at the financial year, the shareholders are certainly happy. But what are some of the concerns or areas of improvement, if you may, that you see in Safaricom in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, as a company, you touched on one of them, which is big data analytics. And we are going to be investing a lot in that space going forward. We still see quite a lot of growth to come from mobile money. And you're seeing a lot of countries shift towards a cash-light economy, India, for example. And I think we will move more and more to that cash-light economy, so we'll have a bigger role to play in that space. Data has been growing significantly over the past and consistently over the past few years, so that's going to continue to grow. We need to get data into people's homes so they have more of an unlimited access to it. Today it's always going to have to be limited if it's going to be mobile.
Is there a future for voice?
Yeah.
Nobody bothers about that anymore.
Yeah, well, look, I'm actually in the process of reading Jared Diamond's book, The Third Chimpanzee. And for this particular chimpanzee, the difference between us and our closest relatives, apart from 1.6 percentage of genes, is the fact that we can speak. And if we can speak, we will always want to speak. Despite the trends that we're seeing, where once upon a time,
we'd rather text than speak.
The image was this, and then the image became that, and then the image became the selfie, but you still want to speak. And so I think there is a future for voice. We continue to see growth in voice because we also continue to see growth in our customer base. Last year, I think we added about 1.6 million customers. So that continues to grow.
So this will be new markets or existing markets?
New customers coming into the market for the first time. Don't forget, our population here in Kenya is growing at about 1 million a year. So that's 1 million customers to be gained every year, and they will speak. They'll find new ways of communicating, so WhatsApp and visual images, so there will be that change, but I think there still is very much a future for voice.
Right. Let's take a quick break because we've been spending part of the time discussing Safaricom as a business. After the break, we look at the leadership question in Safaricom. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching CNBC Africa's Captains of Industry, and today we sit down with Safaricom Chief Executive Officer Bob Collymore. We spent quite a bit of time understanding the business. Let's talk about the leadership question because, like you said, leadership is certainly coming into a lot of focus, not just for Kenya because of the election, but globally as well when you look at America and Europe and China and everywhere else. Let's start off with what is the leadership culture at Safaricom?
Well, let me just talk about me for a minute. I like to think of it as being much more inclusive, and it has to be inclusive because the people who are smart are further down the organization. I always say that smart leaders hire people who are smarter than themselves, and if you do that, then you have to be inclusive. And so, that's probably one word that I would use to describe it. But inclusive not just in terms of listening to the team and listening to other input, but also ensuring that as you take the business forward, you include everyone. You don't leave anyone behind. It is that absence of inclusiveness that have led to some of the challenges we see in the electoral environment in Europe or Britain to be more precise, in the United States, it's because people have been left behind. So we try to make sure that as we take our company forward, we don't leave anyone behind.
And that is something very difficult to do for a company the size of Safaricom. It's easier for an office with 10 people. How do you ensure that vision is passed on to the different levels of leadership?
You try to recruit well. And for me, I manage 12 people. I don't manage 5,000 people. And in those 12 people, they're all handpicked. They're people who I hired. And you hire them because they had the right DNA, not because they're similar to you, but because they had the right DNA and they understand what the company purpose was like. I'm working on a principle of 3 Ps. Purpose, so the company has to be purpose-driven, and everyone who comes into the company has to understand that purpose. The second is people, because without people, we don't have a company. And then the third one falls out from that, which is profit. And we're a reasonably profitable company. But it is the 3 Ps: purpose, people, then profit.
Are there situations where circumstances outside this redirect these 3 Ps that you're working with? Say innovation, legislation, new markets.
Yeah, everything outside influences what we do. And that's what excites us. Customer changing needs. Even 6 years that I've been here, customer behavior has changed significantly. The technology has changed significantly. The environment, the competitive environment has changed. And so they're the things that, as a CEO, my job is to kind of keep scanning that horizon to see what's changing or what's likely to change, and then guide the company in that direction.
You recently made a very bold statement by declaring your wealth in an attempt, obviously, to encourage more leaders to lead people with integrity. Give us a sense of how that is going for you.
We were, Joshua Oigara and I were a little disappointed that other leaders didn't follow that transparent route. What we were trying to do was just encourage more transparency.
Right.
We came in for a lot of criticism. We came in for a lot of criticism from our peers because they said, you don't understand this environment. Why are you forcing us to do this? We're forcing because we are strong believers in transparency. Right. And because I'm running a public company, I'm being paid by 600,000 shareholders. They should know how much I'm earning. Now, they didn't need to know how much assets I've got. Josh and I went one step beyond to say, this is the assets we got. So, if you think we have anything else, then sure, go find it. Right. But we also wanted to lead by example, to say to people, you don't have to have 5 farms and 16 cars to be successful.
Right.
What you have to be successful is to make a difference in the world in which you operate.
What would it take to change that tone from the top? Because obviously there are a few leaders like yourself who would dare go that way, but we still have a lot of leaders in corporate Kenya who are still adamant in taking this. What would it take to change?
Yeah, look, I think it's a matter of time before regulation steps in. Right. Because if you want to operate to global standards, if I was operating as a CEO for a listed company in South Africa or in the United States, I would have to declare it. The public accounts will, the publicly published accounts will declare it. And so regulations will head that way, whether people like it or not, because of that accountability to our shareholders.
You've talked about regulation. Let's talk about Safaricom's relationship with regulation. Recently, there's a lot of noise about dominance. First, we are trying to define what dominance is and why we should punish somebody who's doing pretty well. Just give us a sense of how did that argument go, and did we solve it?
Well, the CA has commissioned a report, which I believe that they're about to publish. We're not privy to what that report says. But our abiding argument has always been, you need to punish the abuse of a leadership position, not just punish leadership in itself.
Right.
If you look at what Safaricom has achieved, look at the number of jobs that has been sustained in the last year. We had a True Value report published not long ago, which showed that we were sustaining about 845,000 jobs. What we should be doing in the country is, actually across the continent, is we should be encouraging more big businesses. McKinsey published a report, Lines on the Move 2, last year, which showed that of the African companies, none of them were big enough to feature in the Fortune 500.
Right.
But it also showed that of the 400 or so companies with a revenue above $1 billion, they are actually outperforming their global peers. And so the suggestion then is that Africa should be encouraging more companies like Safaricom and like Dangote and those other big companies, because that's what's going to take this continent to where it needs to go, not to reduce everybody to the size of pygmies.
Right. Let's revisit that question of sustainability, and there's concern that the CSR culture, that it's too little, too late. Big corporates only give just to make themselves feel better because of the profits they're making. What do you see as the future of CSR?
I absolutely agree with that view. I don't like the word CSR. I think you have to embed into your company, into the core operations of your company, right, the principles of sustainability. And if you just take the three issues of inequality, poverty alleviation, and climate change, right, we look at every single thing we do in the company through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, we do some CSR, right, and actually we do quite a bit of CSR. So if you take our M-Pesa Academy, for example, being built to cater for 1,000 bright, massively underprivileged children, and they'll create leaders of tomorrow, and that's fine. That's some of the charitable work. But you have to make sure that everything you do as a company, if you're a bank, what are you doing to assist SMEs, right, to achieve what they want to achieve? And so, our view is embedded into the core of the business. Don't just have a CSR department where you write a check and you sign off. I don't like the word CSR or CSI. In fact, we've stopped using it here.
Let's talk about the future, because as a tech company, there's obviously a lot of eyes in terms of what you're doing to promote young techies who are coming up, what you're doing to promote the Silicon Savannah along Gong Road. And there's a conversation of, are we innovating, or is it support that we do not have? Just give us a sense of where you sit in that conversation.
I don't think we're doing enough. Safaricom, I don't think we're doing enough to support it, to be honest. We had the Spark Fund, where we're investing in early stage companies, and we have invested in some, like Sendi, the courier company, Eneza, education solution. We've invested in another one for job finding. So all of those are about transforming lives. But is that enough? I don't think so. I think we're also a very tough company to work for, and some of the criticism that we have leveled against us, I think is actually quite justified. Right. And that's why we're changing. And I'm setting up a separate innovation unit. We're in the process of hiring the people, because obviously we need to get a new DNA for dealing with that. It will be set outside of this building. It will be someplace else. And we'll have a whole different set of terms of references, right, not the standard ones. We also need to be finding ways of encouraging investments in those companies, either our investment or finding ways of bringing Silicon Valley money into it, right, to help those.
Yeah, because we don't see a lot of excitement in funding startups in Kenya. Great ideas, they end at the pitching level. We never hear about them, other than one or two who may have a successful exit. Is there a role other than Safaricom that other players, say government or other private sector players, can do that is more specific, that is more immediate in helping this?
Yeah, I don't mean to be disrespectful to government, but government actually has a very limited role to play in a lot of spaces. A really important role to play in setting frameworks and policy. But in terms of this stuff, I think the private sector has a bigger role to play. Right. We talk about inclusiveness, and when you grow, you have to grow in an inclusive way. And it's important that when a company like Safaricom grows, that we bring along this whole community with us. We also have a huge networking effect. We are able to bring people from Silicon Valley and put them in touch with people here. Right. And because I look at my company as a company which operates something like a platform or as a raft to help people to get to their destination, for us, sometimes we will bring people together where we don't. I'll give you a very good example. Right. So recently we had a visit from His Excellency, the President of Togo, who came to look at what we were doing, wanted to talk about M-Pesa, wanted to talk about M-Kopa. We demonstrated M-Kopa to him. It was a public holiday and he came here. We demonstrated M-Kopa, and now we're moving that conversation along of how can we get M-Kopa into Togo. Right. There's nothing to do with Safaricom. But we have that convening power to pull these two things together to help Jesse Moore and the Mkopa team to break into another market. So often we would want to help people to get to where they want to get to. I mean, another good example is Little, the taxi hailing company. The company came to us and says, could you assist us to do this? And we said, sure. This is not a Safaricom product. It's a Kraft Silicon product. And we will help Kamau and his team to achieve what they want to achieve. So this convening power that we have, this networking effect that we have, we think we can bring quite a lot of players together to assist the startup community here.
Right. Other than obviously what has been raised before of the quality of network, what are some of the concerns that keep you up at night, that if you had a paranoia department, that is what they'll be handling? I
do have a paranoia department, and it's called the CEO. So I am Mr. Paranoid. And the things that I'm paranoid about are actually the bigger problems. So I'm really paranoid about the growing youth employment in the country, and how do you usefully engage those people, and do the maths whichever way you like. It's growing, and if we don't address that problem as the business community, as the public sector, then that's going to be a big issue for us. Then there's some other existential problems. We've got elections coming up here. We've got the new president being inaugurated in America. We have Britain trying to find its way in Europe. So all those existential problems will have an effect on us here. We no longer live on an island. So we try to figure out how we respond to those things. How do we respond to an appreciating dollar, for example, which has got little to do with the performance of the shilling in its own right. So we try to figure out how we deal with those things. But the bigger problem of our young people, how do we gainfully employ them, I think is a big worry for me.
2022, you're not seated in this office anymore. What would you be doing?
Hopefully painting pictures. I do a little sideline in portraits, and I'm happy to be commissioned to do your portrait if you wish.
Let me save up for that. Let's leave it there. Many thanks. Bob Collymore, Safaricom Chief Executive Officer.